Welcome to the section B of core module 2. The title of our section is Barriers and Enablers for Women Entrepreneurs. And after going through the session and the materials that we provided for the module, you'd be able to understand the barriers and enabling environment for women entrepreneurs. When it comes to socio-cultural elements, that has a major role to play in terms of ensuring women's empowerment through entrepreneurship. We have seen through Module 1 as well that there are conservative elements in the society that works against it, that do not want women to go outside, to have any sort of education, any sort of employment, any sort of access to ICT. So these are all working against women entrepreneurship. That's one. Then we also look into that there are different governments with the policies and rules and regulations in place to facilitate women entrepreneurship. But unfortunately, for the societal practices and stigma and expectations, conservative expectations, in many cases, women are not allowed to actually use those policies, get the best out of those policies and rules and regulations. So, for example, in Afghanistan, women entrepreneurs have to struggle hard to do actually their work, even with the official government support in terms of policy formulation and capacity development. They're struggling to have, in many cases, basic access to finance, basic access to the different logistics, and definitely ICT. So when we look into the enablers from a socio-cultural point of view, definitely there is no silver bullet. There has to be solution within countries, customized within the region, within the communities. For example, in Bangladesh, we look into this very interesting example of Info Ladies, where the women from the community have been trained through ICT, for using ICT as a tool to reach out to other women and give information services, valuable services, health services, agricultural services, things like that. And they're working as the last mile solution to ensure sustainable access of ICT at the rural Bangladesh, especially for women who are not, who have in many cases limited mobility. So what we are seeing here is within the socio-cultural norms, within that conservative society, we can still move around, we can still push the cultural barriers and then solve the problems with our entrepreneurial activities and with the effective use of ICT. So let's reflect on what are the major socio-cultural barriers we have in our own society. Let's reflect on that. While going through the materials in the modules, you have seen several other examples that we have cited. Now, what is our problem? What is our barriers? And what are the enablers? What are the enabling ways we can actually overcome those challenges? Let's reflect on that. And then let's compare and contrast. Are these different than the ones that we have mentioned in the module? If yes, how? And if not, then definitely there are commonalities, common grounds to look into for synergies, for better innovation when it comes to entrepreneurship. So let's take a pause and reflect on this. Now, if we look into beyond socio-cultural elements, another major one is the policy and regulatory environment. We again mentioned several things related to this in core module 1, and in the Wi-Fi policy module, we talk at length on this. So in terms of barriers in this domain, it's the absence of enabling policy environment. We can see that there can be formal policies in place that ensure women entrepreneurship, that ensures or identifies, recognizes women empowerment at the top level of the society, the top level of administration. But when we come down, we see that hardly we are practicing it. For example, when we look into China and Malaysia, there are national policies and strategies in place to reflect broader regional trends, prioritize small and medium enterprises, prioritizing women entrepreneurs. But even after that, we have not seen any kind of coherent policy for gender responsive acts and rules and regulations to ensure and facilitate women entrepreneurs. And also there is no significant enterprise promotion policies to address the specialized interest of women. So this lack of gender responsiveness in many cases can hurt the interest and the growth of women entrepreneurship. We seriously need to be careful when we look into this, and we also need to be reflective on what's happening in our society when it comes to this. Now, in terms of policy and regulatory environment, when we look into the enablers, what can be the enablers? First of all, definitely we need to prioritize the policy goals. For example, Vision 2020, Malaysia envisioned women entrepreneurs to be an integral part of the overall country's development. So that's something that that has to be ingrained, that has to be integrated within the bigger picture of the policy implementation and policy formulation. And the coherency among official strategies, that's very critical, because in many cases, some of the department talks about women entrepreneurship, empowerment, but at the same time, when we are formulating strategies, we don't see any coherency. We see different ad hoc, on the go initiatives. That has to go. That has to be, we need to get rid of. For example, in Mauritius, the Ministry of Gender Equality, Child Development and Family Welfare have been closely involved in countries' entrepreneurship initiatives. That's very important, a good sight to see. And then, more importantly, we seriously need to make sure that we have an effective monitoring and evaluation policy in place, so that it's just not good enough to formulate good policies. We also need to make sure that we implement those, and we have a feedback loop to ensure synergy between different development agencies, different concerned ministries, and we push it further so that the women at the bottom, women in the marginalized communities, women who are not getting access can get access and can make sure that they are empowered through entrepreneurship if they would like to do that. Now, let's take a pause again and see and reflect on ourselves. What are the specific policies that we have in our own country, in our own community? Are there any? If not, let's actually also identify those. Are there any policies that also have preferential treatment towards male entrepreneurs over the female entrepreneurs? Are there any? Because unfortunately, there are some countries where because of the conservative elements of the society, there are some socio-religious expectation that the men will get the preference over the women. So are there any policies like that? Let's reflect on that. And then are there any differences between the official provisions and actual practices? And that's also very critical. And this is where your expertise come in to better understand what's happening in your society. Is there something that needs to be done to tweak it, to change it? Are these, if there is any discriminatory policy, are they working well? Can we make some initiative to change those policies? If yes, how? Let's reflect on those things. The most critical issue related to women entrepreneurship is finance and credit, especially when it comes to identifying the key challenges and barriers against barriers of women entrepreneurship. We have seen across different regions in the world, especially in the Asia Pacific, that finance and credits, especially the lack of it, is a huge problem. In our module, we have provided different examples. If we want to summarize it, first of all, we look into the legal barriers, because there are countries where even though we have formally recognized the rights for women to have access to finances, to have access to loans, to have access to credits, so that they can open up bank accounts, they can ask for whatever, the financial incentives that the government can offer to their citizens. Even after that, we have seen in practice women are not allowed to do that. In many cases, we have seen that some women still need to present a male family member as a co-signee for credit application process. And that's across the different countries within Asia Pacific. And then also we have seen the marginalized financial activities and poor investment opportunities when it comes to women entrepreneurship, especially in Pakistan. According to the Gender JD study, only 3% of the female population in Pakistan have formal bank accounts. And the same country, only 26% borrowers of microfinance loans are women. So even though in many cases we have seen that the provisions are there, the legal rights are there, there is no communication. There is a huge disconnection between the people at the top, at the policymaking level, at the financial sectors, and the people who are supposed to have this. And women in many cases are worse off thanks to this, due to this existing challenges of lack of access. So what can be the enabling factors in terms of finance and credits? First of all, we have identified that when it comes to policies and regulatory framework, it has to be pro-entrepreneurship. There has to be a support network, especially catered towards women entrepreneurs. And we have looked into different support structures that facilitates scaffolds on financial literacy, training, monitoring, mentoring services for women and men alike. So we have provided different examples for that in the module. So I would request you to go through those. And then there has to be a gender element. Those policies, those financial regulatory policies has to be pro-gender. There has to be action plans with targets, specific targets, that is for ensuring gender responsive budgets. Otherwise, if we don't do this, these will be just the cosmetic initiatives given without any actual positive repercussion, without any actual positive impact for women entrepreneurs in the long run. So now, if we look into the financial and credit issues, let's focus on our own communities. Let's see how we have been doing. Are there any legal barriers in our own society? Let's actually look into this in a much rigorous way. Are there any legal provisions that prefers men over women when it comes to access to finance, access to credits? Are there any specific communication and outreach drive to make sure that women entrepreneurs are reached out? If yes, can we name them? Can we identify those? If not, are there elements in our society that's claiming that this is gender neutral? Hence, men or women should not be discriminated when it comes to access to finances. Let's also look into this and see. And then in the previous subsections, we also looked into the ratio or the presence of men and women entrepreneurs within our society and see the connections, whether those are consistent. Whether these policies that we have in place in our society have something to do with the numbers or the ratios or the prevalence of women entrepreneurs or the lack of it in our society. So these all reflective exercises are connected. So let's look into this and then also see whether we have other issues in our own community which is related to finances and credits. And let's share with our community and see if there are unique challenges, are there unique ways to solve those as well. And then we also look into the capacity development, the issue of capacity development. Similar to the socio-cultural elements, similar to the financial activities and the policies or the lack of it, lack of policies, we also see that when it comes to capacity development, there are many ineffective initiatives, many ad hoc initiatives. Even though we see that the women entrepreneurs are identifying that they need specific training on financial knowledge, they need specific training on different professional competencies. We see that sometimes the trainings and the initiatives offered by the government or the private sectors are totally different than the thing that the people are needed. So we see the disconnection. So it's a prevalence of disconnection across different domains within women entrepreneurship. So that's one. So what are the enabling factors that we can look into when it comes to capacity development? First of all, need for customization. We are mentioning it several times in this module. Customization is the key. According to the community need, we need to come up with the solutions to make sure that we have sustainable women entrepreneurship. Only that way that can help us to have a better way of ensuring sustainable women empowerment. So, for example, in Nigeria, there are actually initiatives with enterprise development centers that manages financing program for women-led SMEs. So we are talking about customized capacity development program to make sure that they are training women entrepreneurs. So that's something to look into. But more importantly, we also have seen examples and initiatives where the concepts of gender and entrepreneurship are in the academic syllabus of different countries to actually install the idea, to integrate the idea with that and to adopt the idea from the very beginning so that it's not something of a foreign concept when we actually go outside the school in the real world to make money, to make living. For example, it's actually a relatively older example from Uganda, where we look into the UNIDO Design Entrepreneurship Curriculum Program that has been very much successful. And till I think between 2006 and 2009, around 416,000 students in around 1,400 schools in Timor-Leste, Rwanda, Uganda, Angola, Tanzania, and Mozambique, they have been using this entrepreneurship and gender responsiveness program in their syllabus, in their school education, which started in Uganda. So that's something definitely to look into when it comes to capacity development. What can be the enabling factor of this? So reflecting on all these, all the capacity development related things, can we now look into our society and see, is entrepreneurship included in our country's general education curriculum? Can we say that? Or any level of education, is entrepreneurship a part of it? Can we check? And then, are there any organizations other than the government offering capacity development program to boost women entrepreneurship? That's also very critical, because it's not always we should look up to the government to solve everything. The main responsibility of the government should to facilitate with enabling policy environment. But what about the private entities? Are there any initiatives within your own community that looked into or that has been invested on the capacity development program for women entrepreneurs? So let's document those, let's reflect on those. So in summary, what are the key messages we can find from this section B? First of all, for women entrepreneurs, the society and culture she belongs to, the regulatory regime she falls under, the level of access she has for financing and credits, all these are critical for ensuring the success of her business venture. So all these critical factors need to be reflected on, need to be identified, need to be solved when it comes to the challenges related to these factors. That's for sure. And then there has to be a coherency between the policy making and the implementation phases. The social practices, financial institutions, capacity development initiatives, there has to be some synergy so that we together as a unit, we can work on this based on the customized solutions that we are all the time talking about to ensure a friendlier environment, a conducive environment for women entrepreneurs in our own society.